This is part 3 of Bootstrap tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to create page layouts using the Bootstrap grid system. One of the very important concepts that we need to understand in Bootstrap is its grid system. The grid system is used for creating page layouts through a series of rows and columns. The grid system consists of 12 columns, as you can see here. This grid system is so flexible that you can create any page layout that you want. Let's now discuss how to create a 3-column layout using the Bootstrap grid system. The 3-column layout should be as shown here. The page should be divided into 3 columns with 1:4:1 ratio. One important thing to keep in mind here is that if we add the 3 numbers in the ratio 1:4:1, the sum should be equal to 12 because the Bootstrap grid system consists of 12 columns. This means if the left sidebar column is 2 units, then the main content area should be 8 units and the right sidebar column should be 2 units. So when we add these 3 numbers, 2 units plus 8 units plus 2 units, we get 12 units. Bootstrap includes several grid classes for creating layouts for different devices like mobile phones, tablets, laptops, desktops, etc. The table right here shows the available Bootstrap grid classes that you can use to create grid column layouts ranging from extra small devices like mobile phones to large devices like large desktop screens. We will discuss these different classes in detail with examples in our next video. For now, let's use this class call-md-star to create the 3-column layout that we want. There are 3 simple steps to create the 3-column layout that we want. First, we create a container. We do this by creating a div element using the Bootstrap container class. All the rows will be within this container. So let's flip to Visual Studio. So I'm going to create a div element, and the class of this div element is going to be equal to the Bootstrap container class. Notice Visual Studio IntelliSense shows us all the available Bootstrap classes. This is going to create a container for us. All the rows are going to be within this container. Now, the next step is to obviously create the row within the container. To do this, I'm going to create a div element with its class equal to the Bootstrap row class. So this is going to give us a row. The final step is to create the 3 columns that we want inside this row. We do this by creating a div element and setting its class to one of the available Bootstrap grid classes. So we can use any of these grid classes. For this example, I'm going to use call-md-star. MD here stands for medium device. Similarly, LG for large, SM for small, and XS for extra small. Star here represents the number of columns that we want this new column that we are creating to span across those 12 columns Bootstrap grid system. For example, if the column that you are creating, if you want that to span across 2 columns within that 12 column Bootstrap grid system, then you use number 2 instead of star. So first we want to create our left sidebar column. So I'm going to use call-md for medium device. We can also use the other Bootstrap classes like XS or LG or SM. So let's use MD for this example, and I want this left sidebar column to span across 2 columns within that 12 column Bootstrap grid system. So I'm going to use number 2. And the content within this div element is going to be left sidebar. The next step is to create our middle column, which is going to be our main content area, and we want that middle column to span across 8 columns within that 12 column Bootstrap grid system. So I'm going to use number 8 there. And finally, we want to create our right sidebar column, and we want our right sidebar column to be spanning across 2 columns. So I'm going to change the text here to right sidebar call-md-2, and the content within our middle column should be main content area. Notice when we add these 3 columns together, we get a sum of 12, 2 plus 8 plus 2. Now, the Bootstrap grid system is based on 12 columns, so since the sum is 12, these columns will be lined up next to each other in a single row. So let's save these changes and let's view them in the browser. Notice this is how the div elements are displayed. Let's apply some custom styles to these div elements to make them look pretty. To do this, I'm going to add a style sheet to our project. So let's add a new style sheet, and I'm going to name this custom styles.css. I'm going to name this custom class custom div, and we are going to define a few styles for the div elements. So I'm going to include a margin of 3 pixels, and I'm going to enforce a minimum height for the div element, and let's set this to 300 pixels, and background color is going to be silver. Let's align the text in center, and finally let's change the font size to large. Alright, so that's our custom div class, and let's include our style sheet within our index.html. I'm going to place this just after our bootstrap CSS file. And what I'm going to do here is actually move this content inside another div element. So I'm going to nest another div element here, and the content will be inside that div element, and I'm going to apply our custom class that we have created to this div element. So the class is going to be custom div that we have just created. Let's do the same thing for the other div elements as well. So I'm going to move this to another div element, and the text here, let's change it to main content area, and finally let's do that for the last column as well. And here the content is going to be right sidebar. So let's save all these changes, and I'm going to reload this page. So with our custom styles applied, this is how the page looks. Notice we have a 3-column layout here. Now, there are some important points to keep in mind when working with Bootstrap Grid System to create page layouts. Rows must be placed within a container for proper alignment and padding. So look at this, we have our row within a container. So row should always be placed within a container for proper alignment and padding. We use rows to create horizontal groups of columns. So here we have 3 columns within that given row. Content should be placed within columns, and columns only may be direct children of a row. So all the content should be inside a column, and columns should only be immediate children of a row. If more than 12 columns are placed within a single row, each group of extra columns will as unit wrap onto a new line. So for example, at the moment, if we add these numbers 2, 8 and 10, we get 12. So these columns are displayed nicely next to each other in a single row. But what if the sum is going to be beyond 12? Now let's look at that in action. So when I change the sum here, the number to 3, so obviously it is going to be greater than 12. So what happens is this column right here will be automatically pushed onto a new line. So when I reload this page, look at that column wraps onto a new line. But the moment it becomes 12, it comes back to the same row. So when I refresh this, now it's back into its place. So keep in mind, if more than 12 columns are placed within a single row, each group of extra columns will as one unit wrap onto a new line. Grid columns are created by specifying the number of 12 available columns you wish to span. For example, to create 4 equal columns, we would use 4 col-md-3. Now let's create 4 equal columns, that is with 1:1:1:1 ratio. Here is the example that we just worked with. Now this is what we want to do. We want to create 4 equal columns, that is with 1:1:1:1 ratio. So a column should look like this. Now, to create 4 equal columns, I'm going to make each column span across 3 columns within that 12-column Bootstrap grid system. So let's flip to Visual Studio. The first thing that I'm going to do is make a copy of this div element, and then change the class of all the div elements to col-md-3. Let's do that for all the div elements. So now let's do it for the final element. So now with this change, we should get 4 div elements with 1:1:1 ratio, 4 columns. Now let's look at another example. Here's the HTML to do that. Now what we want to do is create 4 columns, but with 1:2:2:1 ratio. This is how the columns should look like. And to do that, I'm going to change the first column to 2 units, the second column to 4 units, the third column also to 4 units, and the final column to 2 units. Let's save the changes, and when we reload this page, we should get 1:2:2:1 ratio. So using the 12 column Bootstrap grid system, you can create any column layout that you want. Thank you for listening and have a great day.